Thank you for joining me today. This is Lori Boucher with Painted Heart Market. This is video 2 of a 4-part series on painting my Merry Christmas sign. You can find the other videos on YouTube as well, or you can visit my website, paintedheartmarket.com, to view the videos in their entirety, as well as purchase the stencils used in this project. Thank you.
So once I feel like I've gotten all my letters, and these are the parts that I'm going to want to remain white. So when we put a top coat on this of red, these blue papers, these blue stencils, are going to mask off these white letters. And then we'll eventually peel them off, and you'll see the nice crisp lines of the white letters. I found that sometimes when you're using a strong color, so you've got white and you've got red here in this combination, that you can get into a little trouble with bleeding. So I found something, if I'm using this process where I've painted the letter color in the background, that I can do to ensure a good seal. So I'm going to get just a little bit of paint on my roller. It is not a lot. And I'm actually going to roll white right over top of these stencil letters. And what I'm aiming to do is paint kind of seals that little edge. And so then I won't have to worry about so much with the bleeding of the red. So I'm going to seal the edge of each of these stencils. It's not going to impact my white at all because I'm painting on white through the whole sign. And this process works for me today because I've painted the background of my sign the color that I want my letters to be. I have to kind of do this a little bit differently depending on what my design is. If I have to make sure that whatever color the letter is what I go over with it. So it's actually probably running under the stencil just a tiny bit, but because it's the same color as my background, it's not going to show up right now. It's white. I'm going to let this dry for just a minute, and then I'll go back over with the red coating, and this little layer of white, which really takes just a few minutes to do, is going to save me from any of that red paint wanting to go through my stencil. It's not something you have to do, but I really enjoy seeing the letters turn out really crisp, and if you've ever stenciled something and they're a little wompy, it's disappointing. So one little extra step takes just a couple of minutes, but you're going to love the result that it gives you. That looks pretty good. I may just hit it one more time, going back across it, make sure I've gotten everything like I want it to be. I like to use these smooth rollers when I'm working with a larger project like this. It helps me not show so many brush marks. And brushes sometimes will want to lift up a stencil. And so having this smooth roller really keeps everything down that I want down. And ends up giving me that look that I'm aiming for. Okay, I think that's good. I don't have any bumps or anything. So I'm going to pause the video now. It's going to take a few minutes for this top coat I just put over my stencils to dry, and then we'll start the red coating next. Okay, I'm back now. We just completed putting a light coat of white paint on top of our stencils, the blue stencil sticky letters. What we're trying to accomplish is masking off this white background and having some nice crisp letters coming down our sign. And then we're going to go over it now with a coat of red. The goal that I'm looking for with this sign is to create a sign that looks like maybe it was made for a roadside stand. Maybe people have painted it a couple of times, just that little bit of weathered look. So now I have a nice bright red paint. And again, I'm just going to use a sponge roller. And I'm going to start just covering the whole front of the sign, right over the letters and everything, with this red paint. And it's going to take a few coats. If you've ever painted with red, you know that it does take a while to get a good coverage on it. And also, I want to do light coats and let them dry in between. I don't want to go for a lot of wet, gooey paint right there on my letters. I want to kind of let this have a chance to seal too. And it'll give me even more protection so that my red doesn't bleed underneath my letters. And again, I'm just painting the front of this sign. I'm not painting the edges. If I get any rollover paint on the edges, what I'll end up doing is just going back and sanding that off. The reason being is I'm probably going to paint another holiday on the back of this sign. When I put it out at my door, it's going to lean up against the side of my house anyway, so nobody will see that back side. And I make myself a nice little maybe fall sign and have it. And it allows me to have a very big decorative item and take up less space in my storage closet. I don't know if you're like me, but I have a collection of holiday stuff, and sometimes it kind of overtakes our house. So anytime I can let something do double duty, that is a real win for me. And I'm really just taking my time, light little coat, going all the way down the side and covering all the letters that I have. I'm going to be coming in later and putting that green on there, but we'll do that over top of the red, so no worries for that. And I'm almost there. And you can see it's a real sketchy looking coat. This is definitely not how I'm going to leave it, but I'm going to let this first layer dry, and then I'll go back through and do a couple more coats actually, but it goes pretty quick, so no trouble. So I'm going to pause while we let it dry for a while. I've gone ahead and let that first coat dry, and you can see that pretty much on the board there's a lot of white that is still showing, which is pretty typical. Like I said, red is a harder color. And I'm just going to continue painting layers of paint until I get this as dark a red as I would like it to be. And it's going to take probably, with the paint that I'm using, about 4 coats. This red doesn't have quite as much black as maybe I would want. And so you have to give it a few more coats on there for it to be really opaque. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video. I'm just going to go through the process of continuing to paint over the board. And then I'll stop between each layer of paint, let it dry thoroughly, kind of assess how my red is looking, and then I will either move on to the next step or put another coat on until I'm really satisfied with how deep the red is. Well, 4 coats later, I am happy with the color of my red, and I'm ready to continue the next process on my sign. You can still kind of see that I have the stencils on there. They're still showing through a little bit. I haven't peeled them off yet. Also notice that, let me see if I can pick it up here, the edge sometimes has a little spillover of paint. And remember, I said I'm going to use this board twice. And so when I'm going through the next step, I'll show you how to handle those little rollovers of the paint. So the next thing that we're going to work on is sanding, because again, I really want this sign to look like I was driving down the road, I saw some old yard sale or something, and they had this vintage sign that may have been used at a Christmas tree lot. And I'd like it to really look old. So I'm going to use some sandpaper. And I think this is 60 grit, 40 grit, something that's kind of fine. It's just run-of-the-mill sandpaper, nothing big deal. And I'm going to spend some time in particular sanding the edges. Notice that I still haven't taken the stencil letters off. One thing that I have found is when you paint white letters on a sign and then you want to sand it, if that white is already exposed, then you end up dragging red through it, and it doesn't look as sharp as I would like it to look. So I'm going to do some sanding that brings it up to my letters. I can go up to those stencils, but I'm going to be kind of gentle with my sanding around the stencils because I don't want to pull them off. Now, one thing to remember before you start the sanding process is your paint really needs to be dry. If you don't let it be dry, what you're going to end up is just a gummy mess. So be patient. I'm going to just keep sanding. Sorry for the sound. Notice it right here. I know that I have a lot of spillover. So I'm going to take a little bit rougher sandpaper and I'm going to handle that edge a little bit with it, which just brings that right in. I like to really see that peel back of the paint on the edge, for me anyway. I've kind of found that sanding and antiquing something is definitely a personal preference. So whatever is your preference, this is your time to explore that. And I do kind of change up if I notice that it's taking off more. I'll pick up a little softer piece of sandpaper or something. Don't worry about the scratches that you see in your paint. Remember, we're wanting this to look aged anyway, but when we get through, we're going to be antiquing and all those little imperfections will kind of go away too. Long strokes. I'm going to move my sign down a little bit so you can still see my progress. And then I'll show you at the end how much sanding off that I did throughout the whole thing. Got quite a bit of paint on the side right there at the top, so I'm really giving it a good sanding. Going to go back to a little smoother up here by my letters. You know what it kind of looks like is before this old sign got in a sale, maybe somebody had it slid across the rafters in their barn or something, and so it's got some extra scratches on it, which I really like that. I think that really gives it a lot of character. And again, I can start to see that white paint peeking through a little bit, which I like because that's where it shows, hey, somebody painted this little sign a few times. Every once in a while as I'm going over it, you'll see a little more blue coming through on these stencils. It's just where I'm knocking the paint off the stencil. It's not a big deal if you do it or if you don't do it. But you do want to get up to each letter, at least with a little bit of sanding, or else your letters are going to look kind of isolated from the rest of your sign. And I think down here on the bottom, I'm going to give it a little more attention. I'm going to get a little bit of a close-up right here on the end and just show you. I'm going to get a little crazier with the sandpaper on the corner, just making it really look like this sign has been handled for a long time, because again, I want this to look old. I think I want a little more white showing on these edges. So I'm just going to run my heavier sandpaper across there again. So I'm happy with the effect. And I'm just continuing the same process. Kind of stand back, look at it, and think about where you want to see a little more patina on the sign. All right, that feels pretty good to me. I'm just gonna dust all of this little sand dust, sawdust, paint dust off of here. And let me just move the camera down the sign so you can see the varying places of patina. You see I kind of pulled a lot off the edges. And I went all the way to the top. Now before I move on to the next step, and I'm still kind of in this realm of adding some patina to this project, I'm going to make some little wormholes. And you really can use almost anything you want to do this. Basically an old piece of wood may have had some little critters eating down into it. And they usually eat in kind of a small little area. I have kind of a wimpy little nail here I'm using. If I had a bigger nail, I could probably, this wood is soft enough, I could just push it down in there. And there's really no pattern to it. I don't make it symmetrical. I make it just look kind of organic, that this is what happened with this. And you can do as little or much of that as you want. If you don't want any of it, then skip this part. But I kind of like the look. You notice in some of the decorator stores now, a lot of furniture has these little wormholes in it. And somebody's used a similar technique to get them in there. And I'll show you a close-up in just a moment here. Okay, leave that. So here's one little cluster. You can kind of see the little holes. I did a smaller little cluster there up here at the top. I tend to like things to be uneven. So if I can make it where it doesn't measure up exactly, I think that's better for little accent things. And so now I've gotten my sign pretty much finished. What I want to do next is antique my sign, but I'm going to go ahead, let's go ahead and antique it before we even pull these letters off. We can always add a little bit of antiquing to them. So I'm going to pause the camera while I get ready to antique. I'll be right back in a second.
Thank you for joining me today. This is Lori Boucher with Painted Heart Market. This is the completion of video 2 in a 4-part series for painting my Merry Christmas sign. You can find the other videos on YouTube, or you can visit my website, paintedheartmarket.com, to view all the videos as well as purchase the stencils included in this project. Thank you.